What's up, guys? DragBoss Tim Halson. Welcome back to the channel. This bolt can save your life and your engine. Look at that. All that is a simple 7/16 rod bolt. How can it save your life and your engine? If this breaks, it's curtains, baby. Just think about that. This engine here, we'll use this for example because I know it pretty well. I talked to Tom Molnar a couple days ago. We were talking about, I probably wanted to replace the rod bolts in this engine. And here's why. What happened was, I originally built this engine and I used the Molnar 6-inch rods, the central line connecting rods. They came with the bolts in it. I went ahead and, this is back in 2019, I ended up torquing the engine where I built it with Don Rohde, and then I saw something on bolt stretch. And I talked to Tom Molnar back then, and he said, you know what, you should think about doing the bolt stretch method. Maybe make a video on that. And I did make a video on it. So what I did is I took all the rod bolts out, cleaned them all up, and I used some extreme pressure lube that he had sent me instead of the ARP Moly lube. He said that stuff isn't really high quality, doesn't work too well, and I'll show you what happens to it. So I went ahead and torqued them, I think it was 80 foot-pounds, and then I bolt stretched them with this stretch gauge to 6.5 thousandths right here. So after you've already tightened them, you put it on there, you see what it reads, whatever it is. If it's not 6 thousandths, then you tighten up a little bit more until it reaches 6.5 thousandths. You don't want to go past 8. That's the yield of this bolt. Once you're past 8, this bolt's junk. If you tighten it 6 to 6.5 thousandths with a bolt stretch method, you can use these things hundreds of times, Tom told me. So it was all set. I dynoed it, no issues. I ran it. You saw that. The oil pickup broke and took out the rods and mains, mostly the rod bearings. So I had the crank fixed. And at that point, I was at Bob Beach's, and he just ordered some Eagle ARP bolts, which are what these are, and we put these in, and no problems. And here's the thing. You know, I know Bob, when he put the rod bolts in, he torques them. He's been doing that for 50 years, and that's how he does it. I just went about it a different way, because it doesn't matter. You do it the way that you're comfortable doing it with. You know, the thing about when you torque a bolt, what you're measuring is the friction. You're measuring a friction component. You're not measuring the bolt stretch, the actual clamping force. So that's an important thing to think about. Now that I have the head that's got a crack in it and Darren's gonna weld it, I said, I got it apart. You saw I've been making videos on the cylinder heads. I said, I might as well just pull the bottom end down and look at it and make sure that it's okay. I don't want to put it all back together and then find out I have no oil pressure or a knock or a bearing goes out, because it had been sucking water through the vacuum pump. So I don't know if water got in the bearings. I don't know. That's why I'm doing this. So Tom said, look, let me talk to you about some rod bolts, give you some facts on it. I said, well, I'll make a video on it, because guys love to know this stuff, because like I say, knowledge is power. So let's do a few facts just on this rod bolt situation. So one of the things I wanted to talk about, and I don't know all the ARP rod bolt numbers, I just know the L19, because I remember Steve Morris talking about it, where the rod bolts were breaking on one of these motors that was aluminum rod deal. And apparently what you're supposed to do is over the winter, you're supposed to back these rod bolts off, and you're supposed to install them with cotton gloves. Because what happens is, Tom said it is true, what happens is the salt from your hands causes some corrosion in this area. And what that does is it decreases the cross-sectional area of that bolt once it starts a corrosive area and starts to eat into the metal and weakens it. So that's a fact right there. I only saw the L19 bolt being mentioned, but I suspect it's all of it, all their bolts. I never did it with this. I use gloves, actually. But Molnar Technologies, they always recommend using the bolt stretch method. Now, talk about tensile strength. He gave me an example of a 40, I think he said 40 Rockwell, 180,000 PSI tensile strength versus a 55 Rockwell at 265,000 PSI tensile strength. If you hung a 5,000 pound weight off the end, you know which one would break sooner or bend sooner, and you know it would be the one that's less. And basically the fact of tensile strength is, like the L19 is a stronger tensile strength than the other bolts. The only fact is that it will stretch further before it yields. So like I said, on these particular bolts, these are Molnar connecting rod bolts, but they're made by ARP to their specs. And I'll show you. Here's one here. Let's look at the difference. So if you can see the difference it may come to you. I don't know. I'm not a metallurgist or engineer. But you can see the difference in the shank itself up here and here. And the whole shaft itself. So it's a different bolt altogether. But these have a yield of 8 thousandths. Like I said, you keep it into 6.5, you're good to go. So let me show you something else. Now, here's the number one. Let me show you that connecting rod because I already loosened the cap on it. I think I can get it out of here because I just loosened the bolts on the number 5. Look at this rod bearing. So that's a 928 run, 141 miles an hour, 769 horsepower. Looks like it's brand new. Well, I'm pretty happy about that. That's for a fact. Let's put it over here. Now here's the bolt that I loosened up, and you'll see what I'm talking about. This is what Tom was saying, is that ARP lube actually turns into this goo. He said that some people said that the extreme pressure lube gets a hard shellac or whatever. It doesn't, he said. He's never seen that in 40 years. So that's just something to point out. So what we're going to do, we'll pop this cap off too, and we'll see what this is. Now, when you go ahead, I'll just give you a brief summary on installing these in case you don't see the next video. But the bottom line is this. What you do is you take your new bolt and you mic the bolt and see how long it is. So it's 1.932. So you measure the bolt and you write it on this rod bolt stretch monitoring chart. You measure the bolt where it says in, you write it down, whether it's the tang or the non-tang side, and you do each one. Because what happens is, once you take that rod bolt out, you measure it again and see if it got longer. Because a rod bolt or any bolt, as it's used, because it's really a big spring, and it has to tighten and stretch to a certain point, and that's how it achieves its clamping force. So as long as it doesn't exceed that yield, that 8 thousandths, then you can use that bolt over and over. So you record it, and that kind of gives you a log and know when to change your rod bolts. Let me see if I can get this cap off while I'm talking. But one of the things you want to think about in regards to a tensile load, that the highest tensile load on these bolts is when it's at the top dead center of the exhaust stroke. And for example, in this case, what we did is we took the piston weight, the weight of the rings, the weight of the wrist pin, the weight of the locks. And Tom did the math on it, and it comes up to, and that load is 6,700 pounds, which is, it's tremendous. But these bolts themselves have a clamping load of 18,000 pounds. So 6 times 3, that's 3 times as much. So think about that, almost as 3 times as much. But when you think about that 6,700 pounds of that, wanting to pull that connecting rod apart, that happens 138 times a second with this engine at 8,300 RPM. That's what blew me away. I was like, wow, that's trippy, man. So let's see what this one looks like. Now, I'll tell you, this has a tiny mark in it. Am I going to worry about it? Probably not. I don't know if you can even see that. Tiny little mark there. To me, I'm not worried about it. I'm not going to change bearings because I see that. I'll make another video and we'll go through the bolt stretch method succinctly, but I just wanted to kind of run that by you so you can kind of see some technology and information on rod bolts and how important this little bolt is and how it can save your life and your engine. So don't skimp on rod bolts. Change them out if you're not sure. It's not worth destruction of an engine, let alone potential crash and getting hurt. So listen, so I appreciate you, Tom Molnar and Molnar Technologies. You know, they have the connecting rods line and all the crankshafts. So if you're thinking about building an engine, you might want to think about their product because they take the time to talk with you and teach you, and they have a great product. I've been using them for years. So they, like I said, they send in the sheet that has the rod bolt monitoring chart with it, a little sticker, and then they also send you enough of the extreme pressure lube for the job. So I appreciate you, Molnar Technologies, Tom Molnar. Thank you so much. So like I say, you're always seeing and learning something new on DragBoss Garage, and I try to hold that true for you. Stay tuned when we get this thing apart.